I worked the visitor centre at the Great Smoky Mountains for 11 years. I loved that job. The interaction with people, the opportunity to connect visitors with wilderness, the feeling that I was a part of something meaningful. That love is what made it so easy to rationalise what I was seeing, right up until I couldn't rationalise it anymore. My name is Claire Hartley. In late June 2003, a man started visiting our information desk with mechanical precision. Every 7 days, always Tuesday, his appearance never varied. Kayak hiking pants, grey Columbia shirt, expensive hiking boots that looked perpetually new despite supposedly being used on remote trails. His demeanour was consistently polite, his manner deliberate and systematic. He'd asked for detailed topographic maps of Pacific remote areas. His questions were methodical. Elevation gains, water sources, whether rangers regularly patrolled certain coordinates. He studied the maps with intense focus, asked clarifying questions, and leave every 7 days. Exactly. I mentioned it casually to Harold Messenger, a senior ranger who'd been with the park service for 30 years. Harold was the kind of man who looked carved from the landscape, weathered, carrying the weight of accumulated experience in the way he held himself. Harold stopped what he was doing. His entire demeanour changed. "How many times has he been here?" Harold asked. "I don't know, maybe 12 times. Always the same day?" "Every Tuesday, always. It's the only pattern I've ever seen that consistent." Harold's face went grey. "Don't interact with him again," he said. "If he comes to your desk, page me. Transfer him to the junior staff. Do not engage under any circumstances." "Why? What's the problem?" I asked. Harold took me into the back office. He sat me down slowly, like something in him had been waiting for this question. "There was an incident in 1998, he said. "A family called the McGregors, 4 people, parents and 2 children, both under 12. They hiked into a remote area despite weather warnings. They were supposed to return in 3 days. He paused, gathering something difficult. On the 4th day, only the parents emerged. Their children were gone. The parents were traumatized, barely coherent. It took days before they could even give coherent statements." "What happened to the children?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to be unacceptable. "They claimed their children had wandered off, but then they contradict themselves and say something had taken them. They mentioned hearing voices that knew personal things, family details no stranger should know. The mother eventually said she seen something that looked like it was wearing her daughter's face, but the body underneath was wrong. The proportions were off, the movements weren't right." Harold's hands clenched on the desk. "Search and rescue found no body, no sign of struggle, no tracks that made sense. The case was closed as probable animal predation, though no wildlife attack would produce the injuries they described." "And this has something to do with—" 3 months after the McGregors emerged from the woods, he started appearing at the information desk," Harold said. "Always asking specific questions, always in a pattern, always the same day intervals, like he was checking in, gathering information. Within a year, there were 4 more reported disappearances in the park. Hikers, backpackers, a ranger doing solo patrol." I felt cold. "All in the area he asked about?" "In all areas he asked about," Harold confirmed. "The connections aren't official, of course. Search and rescue found nothing definitive. But the rangers who worked here, we see the pattern. We understand what it means." "Why hasn't he been arrested?" "For what?" Harold's voice was bitter. "Asking where the trails are. It's not a crime to visit the information desk. There's no evidence connecting him to the disappearances, no witnesses, no physical proof, and when you try to push the investigation, certain phone calls start happening, federal calls. The case gets reassigned quietly. Evidence gets mislabeled. It's very professional, very efficient, and very effective. Harold leaned forward. So we maintain a protocol. When he comes in, we misinform him. We give incorrect coordinates, wrong trailhead locations, outdated maps. We pretend to help while actually misdirecting him. We've been doing this for 5 years now, and in those 5 years, since we started the protocol, we haven't had another confirmed disappearance in the area he asked about. That's insane, I said. You're essentially playing a game with someone who kills people. Yes, Harold said simply. We are, and the game works. As long as everyone follows the protocol, as long as we continue to misinform him, as long as we don't acknowledge what he is or what he does, the disappearances stop. Harold studied my face. Which means you have to let this go. You have to stop thinking about it. You have to accept there's something hunting in these mountains we can't arrest, can't kill, and can only manage through deliberate misdirection. Do you understand? I understood. I just couldn't accept it. For 3 months, Harold or another senior ranger would cover the desk when the visitor appeared. They'd engage in this careful dance of misinformation, marking fake trailheads, suggesting coordinates that didn't exist, recommending areas that were closed to the public as hidden gems. He'd accept this with the same polite demeanour. He would thank them and leave, every 7 days. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I researched the missing McGregor children online, found news articles from 1998, found nothing substantial. But I found references to other disappearances. A ranger in 1992, hikers in 1995, a solo backpacker in 2001, all in remote areas, all with minimum explanation. I researched Park Service bulletins from the 1970s, found mentions of a recurring pattern of interest from an unknown individual, and protocols for information management regarding certain visitors. Everything was vague, heavily redacted, but it suggested this wasn't new. This had been happening for decades. I decided to do what Harold had explicitly warned me never to do. It was a Tuesday in late November. I was scheduled off, but I came in anyway. I positioned myself at the desk and waited. When he arrived, I was ready. I know what you are, I said when he approached. His head tilted slightly. It was the first movement I've ever seen him make that seemed natural, a predatory attention suddenly focusing. His eyes shifted position on his face, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and he smiled. I'm sorry. His voice had changed. The constructed politeness remained, but underneath it I heard something else, something hungry, something that had been waiting for this acknowledgement. I know about the McGregor children, I continued, my voice shaking. I know about the disappearances. I know you come here to hunt. You're brave, he said. His smile widened. Or stupid. It's hard to tell which. But I appreciate the clarity. Do you know where you live, Claire? I know where you live. I know your address. I know your routine. I have 3 days until next Tuesday. Do you understand what that means? Harold burst through the door, having monitored the conversation over the radio, but the visitor was already walking away with the same measured pace, that same deliberate calm. Harold pulled me into the back office. What did you do? His voice wasn't angry. He was grieving. What did you do? He knows where I live, I said, understanding it fully as I spoke. He's going to... You broke the protocol, Harold said. You acknowledged him. You made him real in a way that he wasn't before. You gave him permission to stop pretending. I left the park that day. I didn't resign formally. I just stopped showing up. Within a week, I moved to another state. I moved 6 times since then. I changed my routine constantly. I've avoided anywhere remote, anywhere isolated. Every 7 days, without fail, I receive something. A postcard with no message and no return address. A photograph of a location I never visited but recognised from maps. A package containing a detailed map of my current neighbourhood with my address circled in red pen. The visitor is still counting, still marking time, still maintaining its 7-day intervals. I don't know if it's preparing something or simply establishing dominance over me through the act of attention. What I know is that breaking the silence doesn't stop the predator, it just makes you its focus. The protocol exists because some predators can only be managed through collective denial. The moment one person acknowledges them, the whole system collapses, and they notice. They always notice. I'm telling you this story not as a warning about the parks, but as a warning about creatures that exist in equilibrium with human systems. Don't investigate them, don't try to document them, don't break the silence that keeps them manageable. And if you see someone visiting an information desk with too perfect clothing and eyes that move wrong, ask for the senior ranger, tell him about the pattern, and then walk away and never speak of it again. Because something is counting, something is patient, and something will eventually come for whoever breaks the agreement. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a geologist by training, which means I deal with facts, measurements, things that can be replicated and verified. I need to be clear about that before I tell you this, because what I'm about to describe sounds like the kind of things someone says when they've lost their grip of reality. I haven't. I was thoroughly evaluated by medical professionals after what I'm about to describe. I was deemed mentally sound. That evaluation changed nothing. I was a seasonal ranger at Yellowstone for 3 winters starting in 1991. I was 25 when I arrived fresh out of university, convinced that my education and rational mind made me superior to people who spent decades working in these mountains. That arrogance is why I'm telling you this story. It's also why a man named Thomas Webb is almost certainly dead. Thomas was a fellow seasonal ranger, 26, from Colorado. He had wildlife management background and this intensity about him, the kind of person who'd wake up before dawn to document bird migrations or photograph wolf tracks in fresh snow. He took his work seriously enough that within his first month, he'd mapped every trail in our sector better than rangers who'd been there for years. Senior Ranger Sullivan had worked at Mammoth Station for 12 years. He was the kind of man who noticed things, not in a paranoid way, but with the attentiveness that comes from long experience. I caught him watching Thomas with growing concern around mid-February. It was on a Tuesday afternoon when I overheard Sullivan pulling Thomas into the back office. I shouldn't have listened, but the door wasn't fully closed. "What happened?" Sullivan's voice was controlled, but underneath was something harder, something worried. "I was at Pebble Creek," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "Running the northern loop. I found something, a deer, Sullivan, but not predation. This was different." "Different how?" "The patterns of the runes." Thomas' breathing sounded ragged through the thin wall. "I've studied predation patterns for 4 years. I know what a wolf kill looks like, what a bear does. This wasn't either. The tearing pattern, Sullivan, it was like something was experimenting with how to tear flesh, like it didn't have a natural method." There was a long silence. "Did you take pictures?" "3 of them. I thought if we documented..." "Delete them," Sullivan said flatly. "All of them." "What? Sullivan, if there's an unknown predator in the park..." "There isn't," Sullivan interrupted. "You were tired, the light was bad, you misidentified the remains. That's the official explanation, and that's what you're going to accept. Delete the pictures, don't go back to that location, and don't mention this to anyone else." Thomas left shortly after. That night at dinner, he sat at the end of the table, barely touching his food. His hands trembled slightly. Sullivan watched him with an expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. Recognition of a pattern he'd witnessed before. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas deteriorated visibly. He requested the Lamar Valley route repeatedly, despite the station rotation system. He'd return from shifts looking fractured, psychologically shattered. His uniform would be torn. Once, I saw mud on the inside of his jacket, as if he'd been rolling on the ground during his patrol. I was manning the station when the call came through. It was Thomas's voice, but wrong, layered somehow, like multiple recordings playing slightly out of sync, each with subtle differences in tone and cadence. "Station, this is Webb," the voice said. "I'm at Lamar coordinates 73.5, 110.2. There's something here, something that's not, the way it moves. Sullivan, it's mimicking the way I walk. It's learning my movement and it's..." Static cut through. Not normal static. This was patterned, almost rhythmic, deliberate. Then Thomas's voice again, clearer, more present. "It's in the radio now. It's learned the frequency. It's..." Dead silence. We tried for 40 minutes to re-establish contact. Nothing. Station Chief Leonard organised search and rescue immediately. Sullivan insisted on leading the team, and he was adamant that I not participate. "Monitor communications," he said, and something in his eyes made clear that this wasn't negotiable. They found Thomas's truck 8 miles from his last reported position. The driver's side door hung open. The engine was running, heat blasting from the vents. Keys hung in the ignition, but Thomas wasn't inside. His Ranger jacket lay on the seat in pieces, systematically shredded. His radio was mounted on the dashboard, frequency still active. All they heard was static and something underneath it that sounded like breathing, shallow, deliberate, almost experimental. They found his boot a quarter mile from the truck, still laced, still containing his sock and foot. The tracks were what convinced me something fundamentally wrong inhabited these mountains. Human footprints transitioned mid-stride into 4-point gait patterns. The snow showed something moving in ways that violated basic biomechanics, joints bending directions that shouldn't bend, stride patterns that made no biological sense. Official search continued for 3 days. They found nothing else. Thomas was declared missing, presumed dead. The report suggested exposure-induced psychosis and wilderness disorientation. But at the station, Sullivan called a mandatory meeting. He laid out new protocols with the precision of someone reading from a manual memorized long ago. Certain areas were now restricted. No solo patrols. All rangers would carry backup radios. And most importantly, if you encounter anything unusual in restricted zones, you radio it in using backup channels only. Do not investigate. Do not approach. Do not try to document it. I asked why. Sullivan looked at me for a long moment. "Wildlife management purposes," he said. "Do not ask follow-up questions." But I did ask follow-up questions. I found filing cabinets in the maintenance shed with instant reports dating back to 1967. Pages were torn out systematically, but fragments remained. One from 1983. Visitor reported seeing humanoid figure moving bipedally, then quadrupedally, assigned to Jones for investigation. Jones returned 8 hours later in shock, submitted for leave effective immediately. Another from 1987. Ranger Williams submitted audio equipment for acoustic documentation. Equipment malfunctioned repeatedly. Williams requested emergency transfer within days. Sullivan found me in that shed. He looked 10 years older than a month before. "You're asking questions you shouldn't ask," he said quietly. "Thomas did the same thing. He investigated, he documented, he broke the silence protocol." "What happens when you break the protocol?" I demanded. "Something notices," Sullivan said. "It learns, not just from what you find, but from the attention you pay. The investigation itself teaches it, and it learns fast." That night, my radio started picking up transmissions in my own voice, conversations I'd never had, discussing patrols I'd never taken, locations I'd never been to. The voice had my accent, my speech patterns, my Pacific verbal tics. 3 weeks later, I heard my own voice calling from the woods. "Marcus, help, I'm hurt." I drove towards the park boundary and didn't stop until I was in California. I called Sullivan from an airport payphone and told him what I'd done. The postcard arrived 6 months later, no return address. The handwriting was my own. It read, "We're still learning to make your voice sound right. Keep practicing." I have never returned to Yellowstone. I have never returned to any national park. I understand now that when rangers go missing, when protocols are implemented without explanation, when areas are just simply closed to the public, there's a reason. Some things notice when you investigate them, some things learn from that attention, and some things become very good at being exactly what you're searching for.